Third E stands for empty, the empty tomb. Now, some people will say, well, I'll tell you why the tomb was empty. The body was never in it in the first place, because they don't bury execution victims. So the Romans would throw the bodies of the dogs, and that was part of the horror of being executed, that your body got eaten by wild dogs. But guess what? We have evidence that some crucifixion victims were indeed buried. Several years ago, they found the remains of a crucifixion victim with still the spike driven through his heel bones and pieces of the alavoids of the cross still attached. And he had been buried.
Do we know the circumstances? We probably don't know.
It was apparently one of the people who was crucified as part of the uprising in 70 A.D. When the temple was destroyed and Jerusalem was destroyed. And many people were crucified back then. And he's not the only crucifixion victim whose remains have been discovered. So, and I interviewed scholars who said that the burial of Jesus, as reported in the Gospels, is totally consistent with Roman and Jewish custom at the time and makes sense. But why? How do we know it's empty? Well, I found sources inside the New Testament and outside the New Testament that said that when the disciples began proclaiming that Jesus had risen, what the enemies of Jesus said was, the disciples stole the body. Well, they're admitting the tomb's empty. They're trying to explain how it got empty. They're conceding implicitly it's empty. It's like if you're a teacher and a student comes up to you and says, a dog ate my homework. That student's admitting, I don't have my homework, but I can explain what happened to it. The dog ate it. So the enemies of Jesus are admitting the tomb is empty. They're trying to explain how it got empty by the disciples stealing the body. Well, nobody believed the disciples stole the body then or now. They didn't have the motive, the means, or the opportunity. And so everybody in the first century, whether they're believers in Jesus or enemies of Jesus, explicitly or implicitly, everybody's conceding the tomb is empty. And then the fourth E stands for the word eyewitnesses. When you study ancient history, and we find a fact that we believe about ancient history, maybe something about Alexander the Great or whatever, and you dig down into that fact, what you generally discover is there's one source to confirm it. Maybe, if you're lucky, two sources to confirm that fact. And yet we believe it based on the data, that we got these two good sources or one good source telling us it's true. Well, for the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the resurrected Jesus, I found 9 ancient sources inside and outside the New Testament confirming and corroborating the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the risen Christ. That is an avalanche of historical data.